All right. Good afternoon, Major-General Jennie Carignan, Commander of the NATO Mission in Iraq. As Rudaw Research Center, we are very pleased to have you today on this virtual panel interview. Let me start with a brief introduction, just for the audience as well with you. So, General Jennie Carignan, she has graduated from the Royal Military College of Canada, and also she has also graduated from the United States Army Command and General Staff College and the School of Advanced Military Studies, where she earned a master's degree in military arts and science. She also previously commanded two combat engineer regiments, Royal Military College Saint-Jean and the 2nd Canadian Division, where she led more than 10,000 soldiers. And she also participated in the 3 previous expeditionary operations in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the Golan Heights, and Afghanistan. And I'm here with you today with other colleagues. Noor Fada, he's the head of the radio, the Rudaw. And also we have Mr. Diyar Kurda, who's head of planning at Rudaw as well. And we have Mr. Shafo, and he's head of the output at the Rudaw Media Network. So we are very pleased to have you here today with us. I think what I'm suggesting, first of all, if you could, like, for 10-15 minutes to speak on the NATO mission in Iraq. As we know that the NATO engagement with Iraq, it goes back to 2004, starting training the Iraqi security forces, and that has went on like in 2011, that when NATO granted Iraq as a partner, and also in 2012, so signing the partnership and cooperation program with Iraq, and then later through the global coalition, NATO continued to providing the support for the Iraqi security forces. And also in July 2018, in the Brussels summit, in the Allied launched the NATO Allied launched the non-combat training and capacity building mission for Iraq. So please.
Good afternoon, Ali. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to be able to speak about NATO Mission Iraq. If I may start, I can tell you about what NATO Mission Iraq is right now, and a little bit of its development over the past couple of years since the summer of 2018, when this new NATO Mission Iraq was established. So NATO Mission Iraq is a non-combat mission that provides advice at the Ministry of Defense on defense sector reform. So this is where we are involved, is at the strategic level, at the Ministry of Defense level of the Iraqi Armed Forces. It's a team of military and civilian experts who work hand in hand with the senior Iraqi leadership, both civilian and military within the MOD, to work on their reform priorities. So the Iraqis, the MOD has expressed 10 areas of reform within the Ministry of Defense, and these are the areas that we are tackling with the senior leadership. Initiatives and reform areas such as fighting corruption, improve human and resource management, improve the training management, improve readiness, policy and strategy, law of armed conflicts, leadership, women, peace and security, and professional military education are main areas of reforms within with which we work on with the Iraqi senior leadership. In other words, the aim of NATO Mission Iraq is to enable the Iraqi Ministry of Defense to build a military force that can meet its strategic requirements, ensuring that the armed forces are a credible forces by the Iraqis, capable of asserting Iraqi sovereignty and respected by its international partners. So this is what NMI is working towards with the Iraqi Ministry of Defense. Now, the mission has sustained a few changes since its inception in 2018. So the mission was built starting from the autumn of 2018 and started to deliver effects really in the spring of 2019. So of course it takes a while to scope the Iraqi requirements. The mission is founded on the principle that we are here at the invitation of the government and that we are addressing the government of Iraq's needs and requirements. So scoping the requirements took a little bit of time. And this is what had to be done between the fall of 18 and the spring of 2019, with, of course, the generation of the appropriate advisors to tackle the problems identified by our Iraqi partners. So that takes a little while to do. So the mission was at full operational capacity in September of 2019. So it was going full speed, both in training trainers within 11 Iraqi technical schools, such as logistics, bomb disposal, engineer, medical, signalers, that sort of things. And also at the ministerial level and within the professional military education institutions, the Defense University. However, January happened with a lot of instability security-wise, and then the pandemic hit in March. And in March, with the pandemic, the Iraqi armed forces ceased training in their schools. And then, of course, we couldn't keep the trainers in for training. So we reframed the mission and focused the mission completely at the Ministry of Defense level, completely at the strategic level. And then when we can resume training, then we will look at scoping the requirement in terms of trainers to revert back into that area. But for now, we are fully committed at the Ministry of Defense level, at the strategic level, to work on institutional level reforms. This past week, the NATO Ministers of Defense approved a request from the Iraqi government to expand NATO Mission Iraq with additional advisors and expand the mission in other security areas, such as the Ministry of Interior. So we will be sustaining expansion in the next few months, over the next year. It will be a scalable, progressive expansion as at the request again of the Iraqi government and the Iraqi security forces. So in a nutshell, that's where we are today, NATO Mission Iraq.
Okay, thank you very much. Before I turn to my colleagues to ask questions, so just couple questions. So it seems like NATO mission in Iraq actually dealing with like a Prime Minister's office, Defense Ministry, Interior Ministry, and the Counter-Terror Unit, and also I think the National Security Advisor's office. So as we see, like since last year, there has been like political changes in Iraq. So how that change is gonna like affect your mission like in Iraq in terms of the change of Prime Minister's position and also in the ministerial level, like you're dealing with, even like, let's say for the next year, as we expecting the election, whether it will take place on time or maybe delay more. So how these kind of political changes or changing position of this kind of a senior people they're dealing with as NATO, how that gonna affect on your mission or your role in Iraq?
Political changes is always important, has a critical impact on defense sector reforms or security sector reforms. Of course, with a caretaker government between December and May, things were at a standstill. We had status quo. So what we did during that period of time is worked on projects that were under the control of the MOD, where we didn't have to go up via the Prime Minister to get approval. So we pushed and worked on areas where we could affect without political involvement. But it's clear that with a new government in May, we really got more focused on the security sector reform. It is very important for the Kadimi government to push on the security sector reforms, and we have felt that in terms of priorities put towards certain projects. For example, fighting corruption. So Prime Minister Kadimi gave the executive order to start implementing the NATO anti-corruption programs, both for the Ministry of Defense and for the Ministry of Interior. So we have addressed this demand with the Ministry of Defense. So we have the Ministry of Defense has now a committee that is managing this program. We're developing a plan to implement this program over the next few years. And then you bring in an important item that I didn't mention about the mission, but of course, when you're looking at security sector reforms or defense sector reforms, MOD reforms, these are very, very long-term changes. And the mission here is built on the concept that we will be here for a few years, for a finite time, to start the momentum on reforms and changes. And then these changes can be pursued in a self-sustaining way by the MOD without having a mission here, but can be continued via NATO's capability building program at a distance from Brussels, bringing in experts as required by the MOD as they are working their reform and transformation themselves. So that's how that's how the mission is built, is to basically start a long-term partnership with Iraq and in supporting them in their road to stability and in reforms as well.
All right, thank you. Another follow-up question regarding to the NATO mission in Iraq is after the killing of Soleimani earlier this year, we have witnessed that NATO was like pulling out some of its personnel from Iraq. Sort of like about the concern about the escalate of the security issues in Iraq. So how do you see, like, even there were like also more attacks on the Iraqi joint, I mean, it was a coalition basis where like some of these bases were like even the host of the NATO trainings. How that this kind of activities like affect your also your mission in Iraq, like when it comes to attacks on the Iraqi and the coalition bases around the country?
Yes, of course, it's a major factor that we consider in our posture here and how we base our forces. So we take that under consideration. The Iraqi government, the government of Iraq, has also clearly emphasized and committed to providing security for the NATO forces here in Iraq. So the changes that we have adopted also for the mission in March also take into account the security situation and making sure that our troops are as safe as it can be, mitigate the risk. It is clear that you never have a completely risk-free situation, but I think our current posture, security posture, allows us to conduct our activities with freedom of action. So we are well positioned. We have also this COVID threat that is extremely important, and it's affecting everybody, and it's difficult to work in this environment. But we now have developed protocols and ways of working with our Iraqi counterparts. We do some of our activities like this via virtual Zoom or virtual conference rooms, and have developed capacity and abilities to do it. Before, everybody preferred to do it in person, but now we have developed various different ways of interacting. So currently, within COVID and within the security situation, we have a good, robust posture that allows us to do our work.
All right, thank you. I'm gonna turn to my colleagues to have questions, and then I will have more follow-up questions to you. Okay, yeah. Please. Is it on?
Is my voice clear?
I can't hear you very well.
Now?
This is a little bit better.
Yeah. Is it? Yeah. Maybe. Maybe now? Yeah, I think now it's working well. So this is Nuener from Rudaw. I'm the head of Rudaw Radio. Thank you for this time and for this opportunity. My question is, one of NATO's missions in Iraq is it's re-emerging of ISIS, to preventing the re-emerging of ISIS. And now recently, especially in the last year, we see that ISIS activities and attacks, especially in the areas like Kirkuk, Diyala, and Nineveh, we see that they are attacking almost like on weekly basis. Iraqi forces, also Peshmerga forces. Like an Iraqi government, there was a lot of meetings as well between the Iraqi government and the Peshmerga to address this problem. How, in your view, how serious is this re-emerging? Can you call this a re-emerge of ISIS? And how do you evaluate Iraq's measures to prevent these attacks?
Mm-hmm. From where I sit, Daesh, ISIS has been defeated. So they are still able to launch attacks, but it is much more contained and limited to the threat they were posing before. OIR's mission, along with the international coalition and their Iraqi partners, currently they are securing the enduring success of the campaign against Daesh. So they are protecting this peace. And to your question about the abilities of the Iraqi security forces to take this on now on their own, they are in a very, very good place. They conduct a lot of these operations on their own, with a little bit of support now from the international coalition. But most of these operations are all conducted by Iraqis on their own. The other, very positive aspect is in the recent weeks and days, there has been various security agreements that were put in place, joint operation centers with the various security forces, including the Peshmerga, the Sinjar agreement. These are extremely promising because, of course, the more complex a piece of terrain is, if there is some kind of vacuum created there, Daesh is going to exploit these areas where there's a gap in security. So having these joint operation centers and security arrangements in place is filling this gap with security forces who can basically defend the local population against Daesh. So I think this is very promising, looking to the future on how and how this has improved over the last few months. NMI-wise, NATO Mission Iraq posture towards this is that a Ministry of Defense that can manage its own defense and its own sovereignty, you know, setting these conditions in place will prevent a resurgence of something like Daesh to come back ever again. So we are really focused on the long-term and self-sustainment of the Iraqi Ministry of Defense. I have to mention that over the past 20 years, the Iraqi MOD has been involved in a lot of fighting. And these reforming and modernizing your strategic level is difficult under these circumstances. It's difficult when you're not fighting wars. So hence, there has not been an opportunity to modernize their strategic level to adapt to modern warfare. So this is why now the time is absolutely right to tackle these long-term reforms that will have long-term effects on the self-sustainment of the Iraqi MOD.
All right, thank you. Do you have a question?
It sounds clear.
The sound is clear, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Major-General Jennie. This is TR from Rudaw Media Network, HOD at Planning Department. Thank you for the fruitful information about NATO mission in Iraq. You mentioned about the security reform. You said that NATO will help Iraqi MOD to do some reforms, and you have a program in this regard. My question is that, do you help Iraq to address the group of militia, and do you help Iraqi MOD to be able to melt down them in a united national army that take orders from the Commander of Chief, Iraqi Commander of Chief, not the leaders of group of militias and the leaders from other countries? Thank you.
Yes, so NMI is focused on supporting the Iraqi security forces that are under the official control of the government of Iraq. So we will only get involved into reforms or transformation or advice with security forces who are officially under the control of the Iraqi government. So what does that mean for the popular mobilization forces? Well, the PMF is an official government security force. However, currently NMI does not have the mandate to be involved with the PMF. This might be possible in the future at the request of the government of Iraq. But again, in that sense, we would be involved strictly at the institutional level in areas where we would bring in these security forces under reforms as requested by the government. The institutionalization, the professionalization of the PMF could be part of a future involvement of NMI, again at the request of the government of Iraq. One of the things, again, that would be important for the PMF would be a human resource management, for example. Knowing exactly who is part of your forces, how many people you have, what qualifications do they have, like any professional military force has. This could be one of the areas that could be worked on with the PMF as an example. Anti-corruption program, same thing as for the Iraqi MOD, that sort of thing. So currently we don't have the mandate, But again, at the request of the government, this is something we could be looking at and scoping with the government what kind of reforms they want to tackle at the institutional strategic level for the PMF.
May I ask?
One more question, please.
Yes.
Yeah.
After United States of America killed Qasem Soleimani and Abu Bahni al-Muhandis, the Iraqi parliament passed a non-binding resolution and asked all foreign forces in Iraq to withdraw. Is there any pressure on the NATO mission in Iraq in this context?
Mm-hmm. So when that resolution was passed in January, of course, NATO was very concerned that, what does this mean for NATO? Mm-hmm. So what we immediately undertook in a couple of weeks after the resolution is we went back in consultation with the government of Iraq to make sure that we were welcome. We were still welcome in Iraq, and that didn't involve NATO, which is what happened basically. So the NATO and the government of Iraq sat together and issued letters on the status of NATO in Iraq. And Iraq reaffirmed its support for NATO Mission Iraq to be present and potentially expand at their request and in fields where they would require additional support for reforms. Back to NATO itself. NATO is a political and military alliance. So it is a very special alliance because of that. It's not just militarily that forces get together to do exercises, but it is also the military forces of NATO get their orders from 30 different nations, and it is from a political assessment. So the political aspect of the relationships in between the 30 nations is something that is debated in NATO, and of course there's a lot of these discussions ongoing at the political level, but I am not privy to that, but there's certainly a lot of political discussions amongst the allies as to how to deal with various problems. And there are many issues discussed in NATO that affects all of the 30 nations in NATO.
Okay, thank you.
بشي زوري أو جندليانة أو كشة السياسية كالعراقي أو ممكن يزور بشكل كسب لان السياسة كان بوشي أو ثاني نحسبها وبوشي كاريجري كان نقول سلك سنوي هذا كان يبج مركي كان يتحريم كردستان كتصاب أمريكا وبريطانيا بروجي جانا
So the second question regarding to the all these armed groups across the country, like is mostly like affiliated with different political parties in Iraq. And also we have like divisions within the security forces inside the KRI. He was saying why NATO didn't play like a role to reunite these forces to make them as more like a national force, because all the corruption, when you mentioned that the NATO's mission is, to counter corruption as well, that it comes from all this kind of a different division within all these armed groups that are affiliated with the political parties rather than to be within one national unit.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think our role is to facilitate stability via a Ministry of Defense that can assert its sovereignty. So this is how we work. So NATO cannot solve all of this on its own. So we are working very closely with many partners who have various expertise. So, for example, we work with the European mission in Iraq. We are also working with United Nations Development Program, UNDP, who has the overall coordination of the security sector reforms. We are working with the Office of the Security Cooperation Iraq, and we are also in touch with UNAMI. So we are working with all of these various partners who have different mandate, and we don't have a political mandate. We don't have a mandate to intervene within the governance of the government Iraq. UNAMI has that type of mandate, but we work with all of our partners to synchronize our actions so we have the best effect in terms of stability. But NMI per se has the portion of the MOD in making the MOD being able to self-sustain and act as a stabilization and can assert its own sovereignty for the Iraqi territory.
All right, thank you very much. Regarding to for the longer term, the NATO's mission in Iraq, will it be quite affected by any U.S. withdrawal or any reduction in the let's say in the support from the U.S.-led global coalition as well for Iraq? If either because of the upcoming election, if the American foreign policy will change in Iraq, or if there will be any major events across Iraq or across the Middle East that will affect the position of these major allies, do you think that then NATO's position in Iraq will be affected by that?
So the international coalition has entered a new phase in its campaign. They're calling it the normalization phase, and they are in transition towards they're going to decrease in size over the next few months. So we are coordinating very closely with them their transition. So the intention for NATO is to be completely self-sustaining here in Iraq without the global coalition, or with however it's going to look like in the future. So the alliance intends to remain in Iraq with NMI for the foreseeable future. Again, I cannot put specific time for NATO Mission Iraq per se. I would say probably a good 5 years. The idea again is to start a good momentum on reform and transformation. And then once this is achieved, and then the MOD is fully capable of managing its own reforms and transformation, then we can do it from a distance in a partnership, in a long-term partnership from Brussels. And a lot of different countries are currently operating in that way. Jordan is in that situation. Jordan calls in various NATO experts on a regular basis without having a mission on the ground.
All right, thank you. Another question regarding to, as I know that your mission mostly for now covering the other parts of Iraq, not including the KRG yet, but although the members of the NATO, through the global coalition, they've been providing support for the Peshmerga forces and other security forces in our region. There will be also in the future that mission, as now expanding that mission, providing more advisors to advise the Iraqi security forces, because even according to the Iraqi constitution, the Pesh forces also are part of the Iraqi defense system. So there will be also some more some coordination, or the mission will expand to this region as well?
We will have to take a look at that. So these are parts of the unknowns as part of the transition currently. How is that going to work in the future? We'll have to see. But right now, I don't have the answer to that question. That will need to be developed further between the government of Iraq and NATO and the global coalition as well.
All right. Do you have more questions? Or?
Yeah, one.
One more question from me. You talked about the working with the Iraqi government and MOD on anti-corruption programs and also management of HR. Of course, I know that you can't impose something on the Iraqi government. You're just like here to help them. My first question is, do you see the political will from the Iraqis and the political parties to make this reform, especially in the MOD and the security sector? My second question, where are you now with the reforms? Like in the last few months, Mustafa al-Kadhimi, the prime minister, he was trying to make new reforms in the government, especially as a new financial crisis in Iraq is looming. And one of the major problems was that the Iraqi government still yet doesn't know the exact number of employees in the government. Is it the same situation in the security forces, as you know, and you work with them? Do the Iraqi government and MOD knows the exact number of soldiers and personnel in that sector, or it's also a problem?
So to your first question, the level of willingness and engagement from the senior Iraqi leadership is absolutely there for reforms and tackling these very difficult problems. So the understanding of the current system, organization, structure, and processes, this is where we need to start to make sure that we have a good understanding of what's there so that we can advise on potential options that they can pick and all of this. So I can tell you that the Chief of Defense Staff of the Iraqi Armed Forces is fully involved into reforms. I meet with him on a regular basis to discuss the various reform agendas, and then we try to unlock areas that needs to be facilitated to facilitate again a change and all of this. So we have a lot of work to do on planning and figuring out what a methodology of what will be addressed first, because 10 reform initiatives to this level of changes, you can't tackle everything at the same time, because it's a lot to assimilate in one shot. So I can tell you that the level of engagement is absolutely there. We have a lot of agents of change within the Iraqi MOD, and we are working through the various obstacles. There is a lot of obstacles to changes. Budget is one of them, as you mentioned. So we're tackling these problems with them. So where are we in the reforms? Yes, if you just take the human resource management, yes, there is a challenge in figuring out exactly who is where. The military has always been a little bit better in that sense, because you need to be able to account for troops if you want them to be at the right place at the right time to go fight. So there's a little bit more discipline, behind the accounting of people. But again, the bureaucracy and the systems are a bit obsolete in terms of time, so they need to be modernized. So on the HR management, for example, you first need to review your personnel policy before you implement a human resource management system that is digital. Otherwise, your digital system doesn't support anything. And then you need to train people in putting together work descriptions. So you need to do all of that work before you get a truly functioning human resource management system. So there's a lot of these moving parts within one single reform item that needs to be tackled. Training of people, make sure they understand the methodology or determine which methodology to use to reform, and how do you roll that up together so that you synchronize all of these reform items. So the anti-corruption program is starting. The first aspect is the self-assessment and peer review assessment that needs to be done. They first need to realize what is wrong with the current system so that you can design an anti-corruption program that will actually tackle the issues that you need to tackle within the MOD, and then work from there. NATO is currently implementing this program in 19 different countries. It has proven itself. It is working, but it's many years of determined and deliberate actions that needs to be followed up. And again, NATO does not need to be physically here as part of a mission for this program to move along. So as you can see, I can, go down the list of these 10 reform items that we're working on, but they are quite complex and diverse, and they require a lot of work. So currently, we are very much into synchronizing these programs in some places, and in other places scope it. In other places, we are in the implementing phase.
All right, thank you. You have another question.
I have one more question. Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of NATO, last Friday in a meeting said that the ministers discussed the rise in numbers and sophisticated attacks against the presence of the international forces in Iraq, which is concerning for the NATO. Do you see the uncontrolled militia groups in Iraq as a threat on your presence in Iraq? And the second question is that, how do you assess and how do you see the Iran's role in the Iraqi military and in supporting the Iraqi militia groups in Iraq?
Can you repeat the second question again?
How do you see the Iran's interference in the Iraqi military area, the Iranian?
Okay. So any armed groups, whatever they call themselves, that are not under the control of the government in Iraq is a threat to everybody, to all Iraqis. And they need to be dealt with under law and order discipline. So we have, as military, put in place measures to ensure the safety of our personnel. And we are also relying on our Iraqi counterparts and Iraqi government and Iraqi armed forces to protect us as well. But I think the greatest threat that these armed groups have that are not under the control of the government are towards the Iraqi themselves. So Iranian influence within the Iraqi MOD currently, again, I don't really feel that as what I sense from my Iraqi counterparts and the Iraqi senior leadership is a great desire to understand the NATO system, understand the NATO organization and models so that they can pick their own model and be able to operate with NATO in the future, either as part of exercises or as part of deployments. What I sense from my Iraqi counterparts is a desire to be recognized on the international scene as a credible force capable of operating both in Iraq and internationally. So the long-term vision and intention is to go there. So this is what I sense, this is what I perceive from my Iraqi counterparts.
All right, thank you very much. Since I know that the NATO working with other international partners such as EU, United Nations, and the global coalition in Iraq when it comes to its mission, but especially like when it comes to like countering corruption, rule of law, the law of armed conflict, protection of civilian, children and armed conflict, women, peace, security, in all kind of these sectors. So I know that the EU also has a mission like when it comes to security sector reform, and in general, the America and also the others, they all like work on the providing support, training, and this. What are like the main gaps, let's say, that the NATO is filling actually? What's the different like when it comes to the mission of NATO than the EU or the other partners?
So NATO is involved at the strategic level in enabling the MOD to manage defense. Mm-hmm. So managing defense is a very, very difficult business. You need a fairly complex structure to be able to do this, and you need fairly complex processes, business processes within the MOD to do this, and this is where NATO is. So NATO is specifically at the MOD strategic level, as well as with the PMNOC and the Office of the National Security Advisor on what, on defense, military specific aspects. EUAM is involved at the MOI, within the MOI strategic level, advising their institutional level. They do the same as us, but at MOI level. The global coalition is involved at the tactical level in enabling counter-Daesh operations, bringing in strike or surveillance assets to enable the Iraqis to conduct counter-Daesh operation. So they are not involved at the MOD advice at building the institution or building governance within the MOD. If I could compare it to the tip of the spear, the soldier is the tip of the spear, and the institutional strategic level is the arm that will project the spear forward. The global coalition is involved at the spear level, whereas NMI is really involved at the arm level to make sure that these process, that the soldier is enabled in doing its job.
All right, thank you. One more question regarding to, I know that one of the, I think, main activities that you are doing in Iraq is actually to help the Iraqi military colleges around the country. So what's your assessment right now for the current status of these kind of military colleges in Iraq? Do you think at the level of the Mandarin standard, they can really educate enough military leaders for this country?
So they need the support in refreshing and modernize their curriculum. And this is what we're going to be working with them at doing. And we're doing this with the Defense University. We're doing this at the War College, at the National Defense College, at the Defense Language Institute, at the Command and Staff College. So we at the MTDC and ECDC, which are the civilian and military staff colleges. So we are embedded within these institutions to help modernize their curriculum, what they deliver to the students. But also modernize the institution itself so that it can affect its own transformation over time. We are also enabling them to be part of the great global defense university network. So we all know that universities have a great international network to exchange on best practices, on new ideas, develop the strategic thinking. So again, the president of the Defense University was very clear on that aspect, that he wants to open the Iraqi Defense University to the world, and then be part of this great network of universities across the world. So we're going to enable this process by putting him in contact with the various associations, university networks, and so on.
Thank you. As my colleague has another question, I think we are close to end of the panel.
Time has gone really fast. It's amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
رسالة من أول الزيادة اللي كانت راسي حكومة العراق أنا هذا مستخدمي كردستان شباب أمير برونيب من طلبة شيء تانو هرمي كردستان ديال هرمي كردستان حكومة البرلمان هي أو كان دولة العراق ديرش شيء تانو هرمي كردستان
بس تقريبا جوابي أوي هاي وكشتر أفوي كلا سر يشني بو عرفت شو أنا بس so he just have the same question regarding this. Previously we discussed about the role of NATO, like whether this mission is going to include this region, the Kurdistan region, as well as you do have the same kind of mission now. You're working with the Iraqi government, whether that will also come to this region to tackle the same issue that Iraq faces, also this region challenging, facing the same kind of challenges.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So. We are in a transition period right now as between the roles of the global coalition and NATO Mission Iraq is an expansion. So these could be subjects for discussion for NATO and the global coalition in the future.
Okay, thank you. So you have
last question. You know, the security situation in Iraq is challenging for Iraqi forces, but it's challenging for the Kurdistan Peshmerga. Has the Ministry of Peshmerga asked NATO Mission Iraq to help them to build self-sustaining in fighting against terror and extremism in Iraq and in the Kurdistan region? And if there's a request, such a request from the Ministry of Peshmerga, do you have any intention to help the Ministry of Peshmerga?
So as far as I know, we didn't get any requests from the Ministry of Peshmerga. And in the future, could we be involved into the development of the Ministry of Peshmerga? I really don't know at this point in time. There's currently mission being conducted by the global coalition. As I said, they are currently in transition. They will be reorganizing with different tasks in the next 2 months. And we don't have yet visibility on where this is going to go. But these could be subject of discussions between the Ministry of Peshmerga, the government of Iraq, and NATO in the future.
You have another question? Okay, I think thank you for your time. I think we took the 1 hour already from you. So if anything else I would like to add based on the questions, or anything else I would like to add to this conversation.
Oh, Ali, I thought it was a great conversation. Really, really difficult question. You guys didn't, let me escape with anything. I really enjoyed the discussion and the opportunity to talk with you this afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation. Really appreciate the discussion.
So you are welcome, and we will also very pleased to have you. And as far as I heard that you are leaving soon, so I wish you best luck with your future career, whatever it will be. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.